Good evening, friends. Today I like to talk to you about how to improve your reading speed. It will help you in many ways. If you're going to write some exams, like take up IELTS, international IELTS exams, anything, if you are able to read faster, you're going to finish, you'll have more time to attempt the questions and you'll do better. You'll do better. So, we need to improve our reading speed. So what do we do? There is a method. First you need to check what is your reading speed. For that you have to check the number of words that you read within a minute. Set the timer, find out the number of words by counting the number of words, and then use the method that I steps that I recommend to you, and then after a week again check your speed, reading speed, and then slowly keep on improving. Use the same method and keep on improving. Okay, the first thing that you're going to do is, the first step to improve your reading speed is that you're going to use a pencil or a finger as a pointer to the text whenever you are reading. You're going to use, here I'm reading some pages. Just see how I am holding my pencil to the text. There's a book here in my hand. I'm holding the pencil to the text and I'm reading. See, it was an ordinary afternoon in the jungle, except for the presence of two middle-aged men crouched behind a tree. They peered into the distance at a group of tribal people who were collecting firewood. Okay, why I want you to do is, what is the science behind this, that you need to point to the text while reading is, the science behind it is that if you point the finger and read, your mind will not be distracted to the words before or after, but it will remain where you are pointing. So our eyes has this ability to see things throughout, not just where we are reading. It has the ability to see behind, forward, up, down, and all. So how to keep our concentration to the text, to the word that we are reading, is using the pencil. That is the first step. Okay, then as your time progresses, the next step is you're going to increase the speed at which you're going to point the finger or the pencil to the text. Increase the speed, like you're going to move faster on the text. What happens? You're forcibly, physically, you're forcing your mind to move faster to the next word. Okay, why I don't want you to follow the sub-vocalization. Sub-vocalization we were taught as a child in school. What does that mean? Sub-vocalization is the process where we form an image of the text that we are reading. We are taught in school A for apple, B for ball. So whenever we say A for apple, we think about apple. So what happens? Our speed reduces. We are using our mind to think about something else instead of just saying A for apple. We are thinking about an apple. So that was important at that stage. But now as you improve, as you move forward, you're going to adopt a new method. The new method is pointing the finger method. So this doesn't allow you to do sub-vocalization. It diminishes slowly from your mind that you shouldn't do sub-vocalization, but concentrate on the text only. Only then you can improve your reading speed. So the second step is you're going to move forward faster. So let me show you that. With long bushy hair and beard, both the men appear to have tried their best to look like jungle dwellers. The undeceived birds, however, sat in very silence on the branches above, as though trying to ascertain the intentions of the trespassers. Another day wasted, sighed one of the men. Abandoning his stealthy posture, he slumped down, relaxing his back against the trunk of the tree. Anudas, we shouldn't be afraid to conclude that there is nothing special about these people. They can't see anything we can't, and certainly not the immortal Lord Hanuman. So, the second step, what you need to do is you're going to move the finger or the pointer or the pencil faster on the text, so that you're reading, your mind doesn't stop and do sub-vocalization but moves with the pencil. Okay. Third step, the third step that you're going to adopt is it is known as active reading. The third step is known as active reading procedure. What we do there is, the mind decides what are the things that you need to skip and what are the things you need to read. Okay, that is known as active reading. So when you do this, what happens is your speed is going to improve even better. It is going to become even better. Okay, that is your third step. Now let me show you that. I suppose you are right, Swamiji, said Hanudas, sounding resigned. He sat back and faced Swamiji as the tribal people were still within his sight around the tree trunk. With one eye on his research subject, another on the bushy face of his companion, his mind slipped into a long reminiscence. He, along with Swamiji, was surreptitiously tailing a community of tribal people in his long quest to know Lord Hanuman, to be who was said to be one of the immortals. If he had heard the word Hanuman 5 years ago, it would have been unintelligible to him. Even his own religion had been alien to him except for donating to charities and offering prayers on special occasions. He had been slaves to an elite lifestyle in the city of Toronto until he lost his wife in an accident, then his only son to drugs and paranoid schizophrenia. He had helplessly watched his son tormented by things that weren't real and people that didn't exist. It had sucked the life out of him drop by drop, and life as he knew it at that point of time, flashing well to seek the approval of friends, scheming to subdue competitors, trying to keep up with every latest trend, labeling and sorting every single thing into the mental compartments of likes and dislikes, goods and bads, and keeping his mind busy in the mundane activities to escape from his inner self. The day he had buried his son, he became strangely hollow, like a loop which lets things pass through it. Every experience sounds through the ears, visuals through his eyes, and the air through his nostrils had started passing through him without leaving any traces in his mind. No sorrow, no pain, no regret. He had buried everything in the grave along with his son's body. After the burial, when his brother was driving him home, he stared blankly at the window. It was not until his eyes met an extremely unusual scene that his mind got reactivated. Bigfoot, magical, flying monkey. He shouted involuntarily as he saw a giant hairy figure flying to that so that it seemed to hover horizontally over a car that was running alongside theirs. There is no such thing there, his brother replied ruefully. You need rest. His brother had clearly thought that his son's death was causing him to go mad. He had shot his brother a stern look of disbelief. Oh, of course, there. He had broken off when he returned his gaze outside his car window, and the magical creature was no longer there. He had peered out to find the roof of that car completely empty, except for a small saffron flag fluttering on its front. To his utter astonishment, the flag was imprinted with a figure very much like the one he had seen hovering over the roof a moment before. That, as he had later come to know, was the immortal Lord Hanuman. One of the seats in that car was occupied by a holy man with such a long beard adorning his serene face. That was the first time he had seen his Guru, Gurudeva as he fondly called him. There was no hallucination, Hanudas. You actually had a glimpse of the immortal Lord Hanuman that afternoon, Gurudas had explained a few months later to him. He had come to India leaving his past identity behind in Toronto. Gurudas had given him a new name, Hanudas, the one surrendered to Lord Hanuman. Gurudeva confirmed. Lord Hanuman was indeed hovering over my car, protecting me from the evil forces that see me as their enemy because I was healing misery-stricken souls all over the world. I haven't even been in the slightest doubt, Gurudeva, that it was real. The most real experience I have ever had, he replied, feeling embarrassed of the fact that he had described that incident to Gurudeva with an ample amount of doubt, out of fear of being ridiculed and labeled mad. To cover his embarrassment, he had hastily said, in fact, Gurudeva, a moment later, Lord Hanuman disappeared, and all I could see was a small flag fluttering in the air. It appeared as though Lord Hanuman had entered into that flag in the form of a small imprint that seemed unreal to me. I think Lord Hanuman was still there in his full physical form, hovering over your car, but my eyes had lost the divine power required to see him. My deluded eyes could now see only his small imprint on the flag. Imprint on the flag, yes, said Gurudeva with a broad smile. That is what ordinary humans see. I see. You know, Hanudas, during the war of Mahabharata, Lord Hanuman was present, floating right above the chariot of Arjuna, doing the job assigned to him, protecting the chariot from covert attacks. Only Pandavas and Lord Krishna could see him there. For the eyes of enemies, he was merely an imprint on the flag hoisted on the chariot. Gurudeva had given a short, mysterious glance at the idol of Lord Hanuman present in the room. He thought for a moment that the idol had blinked back at Gurudeva. Only pure souls can see Lord Hanuman. Gurudas further explained. When you were returning from your son's funeral, your mind was absolutely blank, completely free and detached from everything the external world had to offer. The moment you saw Lord Hanuman hovering over my car, your mind got reactivated, relapsed into doing what a human mind generally does. Instead of letting the divine experience pass through freely, your mind became restless to see an explanation, a label, a category that could fit the experience. It feverishly rummaged into deeper mental compartments where memories of your past experience are stored and perhaps came up with some label like magical, unexplained, delusion, impossible. Your soul got clouded by your mind's mundane little adventure, and as a result, Lord Hanuman disappeared for you. But when your soul became pure again, the way it was shortly after your son's funeral, you will see him again. Gurudeva, what should I do to make my soul pure again? I have already lost my family. I have nothing else to lose. If that is what it takes to purify the soul, he asked as his mind craved sympathy and his body a warm hug. An aware soul is a pure soul, replied Gurudeva plainly, ruffling the feathers of his pet parrot that had now landed on his forearm. If a soul is aware of who it is and where it is headed, it is pure. Are you? Gurudeva looked in his eyes, aware of who you are and where you are headed? So you need to remember this part. Okay, what is a pure soul? A pure soul is an aware soul. Aware of what? Aware of who it is and where it is headed. It is pure soul. Okay, that should be the aim of every person in life. Purpose of life. If you want to find out the purpose of your life, you must be aware who it is. What is your soul? What is the purpose? Where it is headed? What it needs to find? Such a soul is known as a pure soul. Aware soul or pure soul is a aware soul is a pure soul, and aware soul is one that knows who it is and where it is headed. Yes, Gurudeva, I replied at once. I just want to spend the rest of my life in your service. I have been running after mundane things all my life. Now I want to pursue the supreme truth. That reply came. I am afraid from your mind, not necessarily from your soul, said Gurudeva, sticking out his arm, and the bird took it as a cue to fly away. Hanudas hadn't been able to find any words to reply to that. Hanudas, your soul, like the majority of humans of this era, is asleep, said Gurudeva, a mysterious faint smile on his face. Your soul awoke for a brief period of time on the day you buried your son, but then it slumped back into drowsiness. The alien souls have taken charge of your body and mind yet again. Earlier, your mind was making you chase materialistic pleasure. Now it is craving rest and peace in the name of spiritual pursuit. Rest and peace in the name of spiritual pursuit. At this, he had prostrated before Gurudeva and started sobbing uncontrollably. Gurudeva remained indifferent and unmoved, and instead busied himself with crowing to his pet birds. It was not until Hanudas controlled himself and sat silently and upright again that Gurudeva spoke. Hanudas, this fragile, crying self is not you. This is your mind. You are a powerful soul connected to the immortal Lord Hanuman. But your mind is a weak slave of the external world, Maya. There are innumerable ways Maya can control your mind, and one of them is by infiltrating alien souls in your body, into your body mind. Maya. Whatever we are doing is not controlled by our soul, but it is controlled by our mind. Who controls the mind? Maya. What it does, it infiltrates your soul into you, alien souls into your body mind. Alien souls. Okay. Lord Hanuman is directing your soul. Your soul is in turn should direct your mind, and your mind should then interact with Maya accordingly. But in your case, as in the case of millions of ignorant human beings, it is reversed. Your mind is taking directions from Maya while your soul is lulled into ignorance. Once you awaken your soul, Lord Hanuman himself will guide your actions. He will take you wherever you need to go to fulfill yours. Gurudeva's words had stopped registering in his mind. He sat there staring at Gurudeva, his mind absolutely blank. In a fleeting flash of divine light, he saw the path he had to follow. He realized what he had to do. The next morning he left Gurudeva's hermitage for a particular destination with nothing but a backpack of essentials and most importantly Gurudeva's blessings. He had wandered for months from glittering cities to dark remote villages, from mighty mountains to endless plains, but from uninhabited caves to crowded temples in search of nothing. He had met people from all walks of life, from sages who live alone in solitude to holy men who guide millions of their followers in want of nothing. He had let a variety of experience pass through his mind the way water flows between shores of a river. He didn't know whether his soul awoke or not, but he had successfully lulled his mind to sleep, and sleep so deep that no experience, no matter how painful, joyful, how dull or extraordinary, could linger in his mind, let alone instruct or control it. He could tell that Maya no longer had control of his mind, although he couldn't tell whether his soul had gained back its hold on its mind or not. He felt a tingling in his mind after a long time when, in the course of his wandering, he came across a group of tribal people. He had no particular reason to believe it. Nonetheless, a forceful thought lingered in his mind that those people, or the Mahatangs, as he later came to call them, could see and interact with something invisible. This thought had spawned a faint hope in his mind that the invisible invisible being they interacted with was the immortal Lord Hanuman. Where had this thought and hope come from? What was the origin? The origin couldn't be anything external, since he hadn't seen anything special or different in these people that could inspire such a thought and hope. He had to do something internal, something deeper than the mind, probably the soul. He assumed that his long wandering had finally resulted in mild currents of awareness in his soul. Had he finally reached where Gurudeva and probably Lord Hanuman wanted him to be? Two other sages who had agreed to assist him in studying the behavior of the Mahatangs, however, believed the contrary. They thought he had been wasting time with those jungle dwellers. After several months of tailing the Mahatangs, all he had been able to obtain was a set of 7 symbols inscribed on several things like broken clay pots, tree trunks, rocks, and even on sand. Though he had admitted to his fellow sages there was nothing unique about these symbols, he had seen similar but not the same symbols printed on the huts in remote tribal villages of India. During the course of his wandering, he had witnessed hundreds of rituals which a judgmental mind would instantly label as superstition, where mysterious symbols had been drawn on various objects. He never tried to find their meanings. Perhaps the people who drew them also had forgotten their original meaning, if it ever existed. He learned that the ritual is all about the experience, not about understanding. Furthermore, he had been wandering in order to lull his mind to sleep, not to activate it further by trying to grasp the meaning of every little thing. In the case of the symbols he obtained from the Mahatangs, however, he had felt an inner urge to find the meaning. It was certainly not an usual curiosity of the man, but an inner calling that had been tailing the Mahatangs in a faint, unclear hope. His two fellow sages who were assisting him in this pursuit, Swamiji and Brahmacharyaji, had been growing uninterested as the day passed without any breakthrough. Only a few minutes ago, all three of them had tried to meet the eldest of this tribe, Baba. He had snubbed them so wappishly that Brahmacharyaji had called it a day. Then he and Swamiji had stationed themselves behind this tree, and they had been intently observing a group of tribal women who were collecting firewood for an unusual activity that would confirm that they could see the immortal Lord Hanuman. The reminiscent glow in Hanuda's eyes faded and was replaced instantly by a twinkle of hope. He had heard a commotion in the distance. The same group of tribal women stood there horror struck as they watched one of their companions, a young slim woman, screaming and throwing punches in the air. Her body twitched and jerked violently, her extremities flailingly about wildly. A seizure attack, perhaps, nothing new, mumbled Hanudas. He had seen plenty of such scenes already in the variety of settings. Every culture he had observed treated such abnormalities differently. From black magic to ghost attacks, from the work of evil to blessings of deities, he had seen every possible perspective on it. Therefore, he found it hopelessly uninteresting. Should we call it a day? Swamiji, let's return. Let these women leave first, then he will be able to sneak away without much effort, replied Swamiji, sitting comfortably against the tree trunk, observing the frantic movements of lost red ant. As the seizure attack subsided, the tribal women lay down under a tree. The other women in the group dispersed and busied themselves once again collecting firewood. With a fleeting moment, Hanudas had the same hollow feeling of nothingness which he had had on the day of his son's burial. In that moment he saw three human-like figures of light quivering near the seemingly asleep tribal women. The next moment he gulped in astonishment, and those figures vanished. His mind assumed them to be a trick of the light. Several minutes later, the young woman sat up and toppled forward. As she sprawled her legs behind her, it looked as though she was prostrating before an invisible power. His eyes couldn't see it, but somehow he felt that she was prostrated before Lord Hanuman. He jerked Swamiji awake from meditation and made him aware of the development. A minute later, the woman stood up, her palms joined against her chest. She stayed in that position for several minutes. He felt that her lips were moving as though she was talking to someone. Swamiji, however, thought that she was standing silently, tight-lipped and as though in prayer. For someone who just had a violent seizure, she was behaving quite normally, said Swamiji, trying to start a discussion as they left the place half an hour later. Hanudas, however, couldn't have been less interested in any discussion. He was floating in a state of thoughtlessness beyond the boundaries of the mind. Swamiji thought it to be just another wasted day, but Hanudas knew that he was just a few steps away from meeting the one his soul had been longing for. Very soon afterwards, he discovered the meaning of the set of 7 symbols he had collected from the Mahatams. It was a puzzle that translated as follows: the immortal Lord Hanuman comes every 41 years to impart supreme knowledge to his disciples, the Mahatams. Over the course of the next several months, he collected thousands of such symbols or the puzzles wherever they lay enshrined. The entire knowledge Lord Hanuman imparted to his disciples. He, with the help of other sages, deciphered these puzzles and documented them under the title Immortal Talks. So this book is Immortal Talks by Shunya. Okay, so we have read the prologue. Tomorrow we'll read the first chapter. Okay, thank you.